Most people don't know how dire the earthquake situation in California really is, according to a top geophysicist. Many areas of the San Andreas Fault system are now so stressed they could produce large and damaging earthquakes that could kill millions. However, these major quakes typically occur with no warning whatsoever, and it is only a matter of time before they strike. Writing for The Conversation, Professor Richard Aster from Colorado State University explains the importance of preparing for the worst in order to mitigate the damage of the next big one if, or when, it strikes. The state straddles the North American and Pacific tectonic plates and is crisscrossed by the San Andreas and other active fault systems. The magnitude 7.9 earthquake that struck off Alaska's Kodiak Island on January 23, 2018 was just the latest reminder of major seismic activity along the Pacific Rim. Tragic quakes that occurred in 2017 near the Iran-Iraq border and in central Mexico, with magnitudes of 7.3 and 7.1, respectively, are well within the range of earthquake sizes that have a high likelihood of occurring in highly populated parts of California during the next few decades. The earthquake situation in California is actually more dire than people who aren't seismologists like myself may realize. Although many Californians can recount experiencing an earthquake, most have never personally experienced a strong one. For major events, with magnitudes of 7 or greater, California is actually in an earthquake drought. Multiple segments of the expansive San Andreas Fault system are now sufficiently stressed to produce large and damaging events. The good news is that earthquake readiness is part of the state's culture, and earthquake science is advancing, including much improved simulations of large quake effects and development of an early warning system for the Pacific coast. The last big one, California, occupies a central place in the history of seismology. The April 18, 1906 San Francisco earthquake, magnitude 7.8, was pivotal to both earthquake hazard awareness and the development of earthquake science, including the fundamental insight that earthquakes arise from faults that abruptly rupture and slip. The San Andreas Fault slipped by as much as 20 feet, 6 meters, in this earthquake. Although ground-shaking damage was severe in many places along the nearly 310-mile, 500-kilometer, fault rupture, much of San Francisco was actually destroyed by the subsequent fire due to the large number of ignition points and a breakdown in emergency services. That scenario continues to haunt earthquake response planners. Consider what might happen if a major earthquake were to strike Los Angeles during fire season. When a major earthquake occurs anywhere on the planet, modern global seismographic networks and rapid response protocols now enable scientists, emergency responders and the public to assess it quickly, typically within tens of minutes or less, including location, magnitude, ground motion and estimated casualties and property losses. and by studying the buildup of stresses along that faults, past earthquake history, and other data and modeling, we can forecast likelihoods and magnitudes of earthquakes over long time periods in California and elsewhere. However, the interplay of stresses and faults in the Earth is dauntingly chaotic. What is the big one, and how are people preparing? The big one is a hypothetical earthquake of magnitude 8 or greater that is expected to happen along the San Andreas Fault. Such a quake is expected to produce devastation to human civilization within about 50 to 100 miles, 80 to 160 kilometers, of the quake zone, especially in urban areas like Palm Springs, Los Angeles and San Francisco. Contingency plans warn upward of 14,000 people could die in worst-case scenarios, with 30,000 injured, thousands left homeless, and the region's economy set back for years, if not decades. Last year, a report from the U.S. Geological Survey warned the risk of the big one hitting California has increased dramatically. Researchers analyzed data from the state's complex system of active geological faults, as well as new methods for translating these data into earthquake likelihoods. The estimate for the likelihood that California will experience a magnitude 8 or larger earthquake in the next 30 years has increased from about 4.7% to about 7.0%, they say. This haunting photograph shows people walking through rubble in San Francisco on 18 April 1906. These contingency plans reflect deep anxiety about the potential gravity of the looming disaster. Upward of 14,000 people dead in the worst-case scenarios, 30,000 injured, thousands left homeless, and the region's economy set back for years, if not decades. There would be waves of cargo planes, helicopters and ships, as well as tens of thousands of soldiers, emergency officials, mortuary teams, police officers, firefighters, engineers, medical personnel and other specialists. The response would be orders of magnitude larger than Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy, said Lieutenant Kodiak Clayton Braun of the Washington State Army National Guard. And even with continuing advances in basic research and ever-improving data, laboratory and theoretical studies, there are no known reliable and universal precursory phenomena to suggest that the time, location and size of individual large earthquakes can be predicted. Major earthquakes thus typically occur with no immediate warning whatsoever, and mitigating risks require sustained readiness and resource commitments. This can pose serious challenges, since cities and nations may thrive for many decades or longer without experiencing major earthquakes. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake was the last quake greater than magnitude 7 to occur on the San Andreas Fault system. The inexorable motions of plate tectonics mean that every year, strands of the fault system accumulate stresses that correspond to a seismic slip of millimeters to centimeters. Many residents and all state emergency managers are widely engaged in earthquake readiness and planning. These preparations are among the most advanced in the world.For the general public. Preparations include participating in drills like the Great California Shakeout, held annually since 2008, and preparing for earthquakes and other natural hazards with home and car disaster kits and a family disaster plan. No California earthquake since the 1933 Long Beach event, 6.4, has killed more than 100 people. Quakes in 1971, San Fernando, 6.7, 1989, Loma Prieta, 6.9, 1994, North Ridge, 6.7, and 2014, South Napa, 6.0, each caused more than $1 billion, £0.7 billion in property damage, but fatalities in each event were, remarkably, dozens or less. Strong and proactive implementation of seismically informed building codes and other preparations and emergency planning in California saved scores of lives in these medium-sized earthquakes. Any of them could have been disastrous in less prepared nations. Nonetheless, California's infrastructure, response planning and general preparedness will doubtlessly be tested when the inevitable and long-delayed big ones occur along the San Andreas Fault system. Ultimate damage and casualty levels are hard to project and hinge on the severity of associated hazards such as landslides and fires. Earthquake early warning is by no means a panacea for saving lives and property, but it represents a significant step toward improving earthquake safety and awareness along the West Coast. Managing earthquake risk requires a resilient system of social awareness, education, and communications, coupled with effective short- and long-term responses, and implemented within an optimally safe built environment. As California prepares for large earthquakes after a hiatus of more than a century, the clock is ticking.